Hello, my name is Sarah Holland. Welcome to the Fertile Mindset podcast. Each week on the podcast, we'll explore how your mind can help you create a meaningful and happy life. And through the conversations here, we'll be planting seeds of inspiration to bring you more clarity, purpose, and joy. This podcast is for you if you've ever felt stuck or unsatisfied with life and know that you want to live in a bigger and more beautiful way. I hope you enjoy the time you spend with us. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to the Fertile Mindset podcast. I was in two minds whether I would release an episode this week because I've come down with a very heavy cold, and until this morning I wasn't even sure if I'd have a voice to record this introduction for you. But my voice is back, so here I am, maybe a little more croaky than usual, but more than able to introduce a very special guest to you, Jessica Hepburn. I have known Jessica for many years, since working with her at her fertility arts event, Fertility Fest. Since then, Jessica's life has taken many twists and turns through losses and heartache, and she has both adventured and written her way through. Jessica's 3 books are all favourites of mine, and I was inspired to invite her onto the podcast after attending the launch of her newest book and her best yet, Save Me From the Waves. Jessica Hepburn is an award-winning author, arts producer and adventure activist who has become one of the UK's leading voices on fertility and family, as well as a pioneer in inspiring people to live big and bravely when life doesn't go to plan, and championing the benefits of going on adventures to improve your physical and mental health. Formerly Executive Director of the Lyric Hammersmith, one of London's leading theatres, Jessica led from inception to completing the theatre's £20 million capital redevelopment and was nominated as the Theatre Manager of the Year. Whilst doing this, she was also trying to become a mother and went through 11 rounds of IVF at a range of UK fertility clinics, which resulted in multiple miscarriages and an ectopic pregnancy that almost took her life. She turned to exercise and adventure to heal her heartbreak, and in 2022 she became the first woman in the world to achieve the Sea, Street and Summit Challenge, which was swimming the English Channel, running the London Marathon and summiting Mount Everest. Jessica has been nominated as one of Amnesty International's Women of Suffragette Spirit and a Woman to Watch in 2024 by Woman and Home magazine. I was delighted to have Jessica join me on the podcast, and I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation. And once you've listened, if you haven't done so already, do read Jessica's 3 books. They are beautifully crafted, emotional stories of life, love, loss, and, of course, adventure. And just before we begin, as you've probably noticed, the theme of this podcast is introducing you to people who are living the 3 values I speak about at Fertile Mindset: clarity, purpose, and joy. And if you feel inspired by the conversations and stories here to pursue more clarity, purpose, and joy yourself, then I'd love to keep in touch with you with my Daily Seeds emails, which are messages of support and inspiration delivered to your inbox, along with some welcome gifts, which are EFT tapping videos to firstly teach you how to tap, how to use EFT, and then also guide you through reducing stress, clearing overwhelm, and improving focus and motivation. And if you'd like to receive those videos and my Daily Seeds emails, go to fertilemindset.com/daily seeds to sign up for free. Now let's begin the episode with Jessica. Hello Jessica, welcome to the Fertile Mindset podcast. I am so thrilled that you're here with me. It's really lovely to talk to you.
Oh, Sarah, I'm thrilled to be here. It's a beautiful sunny day where I am in London. Where are you actually? I don't know where you are.
Yeah, I'm in North Hertfordshire, so not far from London, and it's gorgeous out there, isn't it? Really lovely. Finally, summer's arrived.
Yeah,
After all our
it just
waiting.
makes you feel, I mean, I love all the seasons, but I do think that summer, just when it comes, it feels good.
Yeah. It's nice to be in tune with the seasons is something that a lot of us can relate to. So thank you for being here. And I know we go way back.
We do.
on your journey that you're going to talk about, and all the different things that have happened in your life. And I feel like I've witnessed you grow and evolve and change as a person, to the point where I was at your recent book launch in the theatre in London. I had front row seats. It was amazing. And you were glowing on the stage. That's all I can describe. You were glowing, and you look to me more energetic and younger, even, whatever that term means. You just felt like you had arrived into who you truly are. And it was beautiful to witness it. And through your books, we can see that story and what has happened for you. This conversation is going to give an insight, I'm sure, to all our listeners as well.
Sorry, just got me a bit emotional there.
Oh,
tears to my eyes. Thank you. So, yeah, my gosh, we've only just started. Thank you for those beautiful words. Yeah, what more could anyone want to hear, that they've arrived? And I do think I'm at the beginning of my era of becoming. Maybe we'll talk more about that.
Oh,
yeah,
exciting. I love this. Good. So
yeah.
let's start with a little intro to who you are and why I do think you're so amazing and you're here. Tell us a little bit about who Jessica Hepburn is.
Oh, who is Jessica Hepburn? Well, it's taken me quite a while to sort of land on this sort of professional job description, because that's often, where people start. And it's an unusual job description, but it really, feels like it is who I am, which is that I'm an author, arts producer, and adventure activist. And actually, explaining what that means is a good way just to give a whistle-stop tour through my life, really, which is that, for most of my career, I worked in the arts, and specifically theatre. And in my early 30s, I was running a big theatre in West London called the Lyric Hammersmith, which is where you were sitting in the front row at my book launch. And I think that was sort of one of the reasons why it was such a special night, and maybe what you described as emanating off me was there, because I did sort of feel in a way that my life had come full circle, because I'd sort of come back to where really, a lot of my life took place, and certainly sort of feels like it started, even though I sort of only started working there in my early 30s. But while I was running the Lyric, I had what I describe as a secret life, which is that I was going through round after round of unsuccessful IVF and multiple miscarriages. I was on this desperate pursuit of motherhood. And for a long time, I didn't tell anyone about it, not even my closest family and friends, let alone colleagues. And then one day I started writing about it, and I started essentially writing the book that I wanted to read, and I couldn't find at the time. I thought it was also a great story. I thought it was going to end with a conventional happy ending. I was sort of writing my way to that. And that first book came out 10 years ago now, this year. It's a long time, and it was called The Pursuit of Motherhood. And it catapulted me into the limelight as a public infertile, and started really my activism in the field of fertility. And it's led to me writing 3 books, which you've mentioned, and you came to the as we said, the book launch of the third, Save Me from the Waves. But what it also led is to me basically taking on adventures in my 40s that have changed my life for the better infinitely. First of all, I swam the English Channel. I wasn't a swimmer, and it was a huge thing to take on. We might talk about that in more detail. It led to my book 21 Miles, and then I ran the London Marathon, and then I decided that I was going to set out on this journey to try and climb to the top of the world, i.e. the top of Everest. And also, whilst doing that, listening to every single episode of my favourite radio programme, Desert Island Disc. So that journey was fueled by the wisdom of amazing people and also music. And that became my third book. And really, that sort of finishes the circle in terms of what is an adventure activist, because I've used my adventures for activism in the field of fertility, but also now you know, I don't know how much you're aware of this, but in the last, obviously you will be aware of it because you've read my book, about some things that happened to me on the mountain, and just in the last 2 weeks this has started to sort of explode in the public arena. So there's more, so I now see that there is, I always thought there might be more activism for me to do around proving things for women in the world, but that sort of activism has now started. But also I'm an activist for the power of adventure to change your life, because I now see all the adventures, including my IVF journey, as adventures that have improved my life. And maybe that is a good place to say why you saw a woman that was in color. Not, I said at my launch that, you know, in my previous book launches, I'd gone from black in the first, wearing black in the first one, to wearing black and white in the second one, and then I was in vibrant red at the third one. And also a lot of I know we're going to come on to talk about joy, but you know, like feeling a lot of joy in my life, and a lot of purpose and pleasure. And so yeah, that's me.
Wow. We've just gone on quite a journey then, haven't we?
I know,
through every
I'm
adventure.
sorry.
Wow.
It's really hard. I try. Also, I'm really terrible when I get interviewed because I ramble off, right? And I really want to make that bit of it as succinct as possible, but it sort of does describe the whole of me, you know. And I think that's what's so important, and has been, you know, to use that icky phrase, in my sort of healing process. You know, for a long time I felt, you know, I was so secretive about my infertility and my inability to be a mother, and it felt like it was all of me. It felt like it was all of me, and also I had so much shame around it. And the moment I sort of came out about it, it started this healing process, and now I'm many, you know, and it started all the things that happened subsequently, from me writing to going on these adventures. And I now see myself as this whole person, and I'm really keen, I guess, to communicate that I am many things to me and other people, and that's really, really important to me.
Yeah, and I think what's very inspiring about your story, and that others will have their ears pricking up listening to, is you didn't start this adventure activism route after the infertility until your early 30s. Oh, sorry, early 40s.
Yeah. I mean, no, absolutely. And in fact, I think I landed on the phrase adventure activism probably only about I don't know, I feel like I want to say 5 years ago. I mean, even though I swam the channel in 2015, so that, you know, that's coming up for 9 years ago now. I really probably only landed on this phrase of adventure activist sort of 5 years ago, and it's only taken on more meaning sort of more recently, since my third book, when I've realized that like a huge sort of message of the third book is, you know, an adventure will always change your life for the better. It doesn't matter if it's high and far away or closer to home in your head. I'm as passionate about big adventures as I am about micro adventures, you know, or I should say it the other way around. I'm as passionate about micro adventures, everyday adventures, as I am about big adventures. But I do believe that adventure has huge healing power, particularly when you've been through dark and difficult times. And so adventure activism has taken on this sort of dual meaning for me now, and it's really something only that I'm settling into right now, you know. And I think that is a really important thing to communicate, that I want to communicate. You know, I have several messages that I want to communicate to the world, and it's just what you know, has helped me, and I offer it up in the hope that it helps other people, and you know, different things will resonate with different people. But I just think you've got to remember that your life is a life, you know, and your healing process takes a lifetime. That, you know, like and also things keep coming at you that you know, that are hard. Again, you know, that's very much has been the case in my life. And so you're still always, so I guess what I'm trying to do is sort of like and I said this at my launch, didn't I, Sarah, that I'm trying to craft my life into a good story for myself and other people. And that is part of like the a process for me that has been really, really helpful and healing.
It's a very alive and connected way to live your life, isn't it? But it's the opposite to being passive. You know, it's you're the main character, and
Yeah,
you're really appreciating and grateful for the life that you have, and
yeah,
not seeing time or age or setbacks or whatever as a stopper, but things that you then build on each layer of you. It's really
yeah,
fascinating
yeah.
to watch.
Oh, and I
And
love that. Can I just come back to you, because thank you. And this is why these conversations are so like helpful. I mean, I do prefer to write generally because I can really, you know, like this last book that took me 6 years to write. I think it's my best piece of work. And I can really craft every single sentence. But and so I struggle a bit with doing interviews because my thoughts are always so rambling and not articulate, it feels to me anyway. But what you've just said there, you know, is a real gem for me. Like, yeah, I am the lead character in my life story, and you are all who is listening to this, the lead character in your life story. And also, you know, that also chimes very significantly with something else that I've been working on a lot on myself recently, which is about self-love, you know, which I think human beings find so so difficult often, that you know, that like and I think they're absolutely related. Like, if you don't make yourself the central character of your story and you don't love that central character, then like, you know, well, I don't think I'm struggling now because I don't want to say you're going to have a terrible life, because of course that's not true, but I do think you can have a richer life if you do make yourself the central character and love yourself, whatever befalls you.
well, when you have that sense of self-love and self-worth, you stay open to opportunities, don't you, and feel deserving to receive them or to go
Yes.
out and grab them and to do the things that perhaps you may think otherwise, that, oh, I couldn't do that, or I'm not worthy of that. Or, I mean, reading all your 3 books, especially the last one, because I think we can all agree that climbing Everest is a big thing and it's not to be taken lightly. And it took
No.
years of training and preparation, both in your mind and your body, and attempts. You know, when people read the book, they'll go on the whole journey with you. And, you know, that can't be done without a real sense of self, I would imagine, and why you're doing it, and feeling confident in yourself. And I'm sure there were times when you doubted, and you say you do talk about that in the book, like especially at the very last moment of, we won't give away too much, but, you know, questioning till the last moment, why am I even doing this?
It's really interesting, again, Sarah, what you've just said, because I do I recognize that I am quite an extraordinary person in that I have quite a lot of self-esteem. I have a strong self-esteem because I think otherwise I wouldn't, you know, I took on the job of being chief executive of a very large London theatre in my early 30s. I mean, you know, to by any account that was young, and I am a really unathletic person. You know, my shtick is that I'm the most unlikely athlete and adventurer, and yet I decided I was gonna swim the English Channel and climb Everest, as you say, you know, like knowing nothing about, well, I wasn't a very good swimmer, but I knew nothing about mountaineering. And also I was in my late 40s when I took that on. And, you know, I must have a strong sense of self-esteem. And I think that has partly been instilled in me by my family history, some of which I write about. Like, I've started to write more about across the books, and particularly in this third one, you know, particularly I had this feminist grandmother as a grandmother, and she was a feminist poet, and I think I've been very inspired by her, even though I never met her. She died long before I was born. So I think that sort of transgenerational influence is really, really important. And, you know, I was lucky enough to grow up in a time where, you know, education has been really, for women, has been really, there and valued. And I went to a comprehensive school in London that like taught us as girls that we could have it all, basically. So I think, which I, by the way, I'm not sure is true, but anyway, it did instill a certain confidence. And I think those things have been really important. But at the same time, I mustn't undervalue or undersell how much inner critic and fears that I also have, right? And in my first book, The Pursuit of Motherhood, which I know that you've just re-listened to on Audible, you'll recall that at one point in that, I go and do a quite an intense therapeutic process called the Hoffman process, where to try and find out whether there was some sort of psychological reason why, I wasn't getting pregnant, and to try and do some work on my inner child, as it were. And, my Hoffman name, because you're all given names in that process, is inadequate, and that seems so truthful of me as well, So I realized that I am this paradox, someone with quite a high self-esteem that can take on things that like are so beyond me in a way, but at the same time I am also dealing with someone who has got who criticizes herself a lot and has also a lot of inadequacy, and not least by the fact that I couldn't have a baby, and I mean, in a way, that's where a lot of that stems from, because it made me feel like I'm not a proper woman, and everyone else can. This is something that other women can find so easy, and I just can't do it. And even if I go through 11 rounds of IVF, I still can't do it. Or maybe it means I'm a bad person. Maybe this is some sort of karma, my retribution. I've written about that too. So I think it's really, really important to recognize that I'm not. It's like what we've already been saying. I'm not just one thing. I'm not just someone who can do these incredible things. I am always battling the dark side, always.
I think it's really interesting, like the gifts that you have there, and that we can all relate to our own personalities of like one strength, like you say, the high self-esteem and the confidence to go and get things and do things with your lineage and, the stories that you have in your family. But it can have a darker side as well of that kind of striving. And like you just said, there are 11 rounds of IVF. That is not a short journey. That is a lot of heartache and pain and highs and lows, and you persisted through that time, maybe longer than your average person would, as we know. I don't know. I'm sure you know the statistics of IVF better than I do. Of how many cycles people tend to have before they say that's enough. And so do you feel like that kind of, that almost like striving and I will do this, which we know with fertility, we have no control over the final outcome. We could have control over a physical, goal like the climbing and the swimming, and you persist and you get the right training and you get it done eventually. But with fertility, it's that elusiveness, isn't it? And you can't know when to stop. How do we know when to stop something?
Well, actually, I have to pick you up there, because but it's a really good opportunity to talk about my fundamental learning that has come from swimming the Channel and climbing Everest. Or I must say at this point, I will interchange between calling her Everest and Chomolungma. Chomolungma is her original Tibetan Sherpa name and means Mother Goddess of the World. Because actually, I feel that those two particular journeys, adventures, challenges, whatever you want to call them, were so significant in me finding acceptance in my fertility journey. And the reason being is that they were in nature, and actually the success of both those things, swimming the Channel and climbing Chomolungma, were out of my control, just like going through IVF. And actually it was very, very terrifying, and I write about this in 21 Miles, the moment when I discovered that I'd chosen this challenge, swimming the Channel, that was actually just like going through IVF. And what like I said before, that I wasn't a very good swimmer when I started, and I went back to ducklings, I learned how to do the crawl, I put in all the training, and then I realized when I did this relay swim that of the channel, and we got fished out because the weather turned, that actually didn't matter how hard I trained or how much I wanted it, that something bigger than me would make the decision about whether I could get across, and that was nature or the sea. And it's exactly the same with fertility, in the sense that no doctor yet can guarantee you a baby, and it doesn't matter how many times you go through IVF, you cannot guarantee that it will be successful. And I think and then she did let me swim her sea, and it was, I describe it as like my version of giving birth: 17 hours, 44 minutes, and 30 seconds of labor, eclipsed by euphoria. And I think then, if I may say this, and I realize I'm going on, but then I went to the mountains, and the mountains are exactly the same, right? The mountain decides whether you can summit her. Nobody, no human being, doesn't matter how good a climber you are. And as you know, I had several attempts on the mountain where I wasn't successful, and it was really hard, and I was trying to understand what she was teaching me. And then I did summit on the third time, but I was involved in a horrific accident, again, as you know, because you've read. But I actually believe, because you've also read what happened on the mountain, that the mountain saved my life. Tummalunga saved my life, because if the weather hadn't been clement, I would have died on the mountain. And so what this has led me to is an extraordinary healing process. And I understand that I have made meaning out of my story, but that is something that I think human beings, again, need to do. And everyone will have a different story. But the meaning that I have brought to this is an acceptance that something is bigger than me, is out of my control. And that is nature on all these things: having a baby, swimming the channel, and climbing Mount Everest. But that I have also come to a strong belief that nature loves me, because she didn't give me a baby, but then she let me swim her sea and give her my version of giving birth. And then she saved my life on the mountain. And that has made me able to move forward in an extraordinarily healed way. Yeah, so that is what I feel.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I can really see the whole picture now so much more clearly. Like you say, nature's the one in control, and trusting, isn't it, that the outcome, whatever the outcome is the right outcome, and to be along for that ride and not fight it. And you did all the training, that's the part you're in control of, just like you were in your fertility journey, that you do the training, you do your best, and then surrender to the outcome. It's quite humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, it is also important to say, because I think people who go through like a fertility journey, one of the things that rile people who go through fertility journeys is, sometimes people get told, particularly if they're within religious communities, oh, it's all in God, it's all in God's plan, or God didn't want this to happen for you. And I know that can be hard to hear, and I'm saying something slightly more nuanced than that. I'm saying that this is how I have made sense of my journey, and it has brought me acceptance that I am, and I also write about this in my books, that I'm a speck, in the universe, and I'm, because I think as human beings, and again, I write about quite a lot about in my crude and uneducated way about big philosophical matters, like, why am I Jessica? Why are you Sarah? We're here talking on this podcast, but like, when we're not talking, do you exist? I know that I'm always with myself, like, and so to me, I do feel quite ginormous, because I am me, but actually in the wild, I need reminding that I am just a tiny speck, right? And so, yes, there is something bigger than me in control, but I am also in control of my own life. So happens to me does matter, and I can influence. And one of the reasons why I continue to do so much activism in the world of fertility, and not necessarily so much in the world of childlessness, although I am childless and I am an advocate in that community, but I really wanted a family. I still wish that I was a mother. I want that for other people. I also can see that there are many routes to parenthood. And if the one that you ideally want, biological motherhood or parenthood for most people, doesn't work, there are alternative routes: adoption, fostering, surrogacy, gamete donation, egg sperm donation, teaching. There are other routes to nurturing and parenting, and I want people to know that you can't always get the things you want, but there are always opportunities to live a big life, your best life, an extraordinary life, and even though some things are out of our control.
I think that's one thing I really admire with you, Jessica. There are many, but is how you are still this voice for the fertility community, and how you will speak up for your particular type of story. I think it was recently you were at the House of Parliament, weren't you, for the Fertility Network UK anniversary? There was a lot of talk. Or was it an IVF? And there was a lot of talk about IVF and like the first IVF babies and the success of IVF. And you were there as the voice of this is the other side of IVF, and it doesn't always work out. And we need to remember that as well. And I think that's so important, isn't it, to look at every possible outcome, because then it gives permission for people to look at, well, what other ways, like you say, what other ways, if I wanted to pursue other ways to become a parent. It keeps the conversation open, doesn't it, if we remember that this isn't in our control and so many different outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's all credit to the Fertility Network UK, but also, like, I always speak annually at the Fertility Show, which is the biggest UK patient event, about my story. I think it's really important that those organizations also provide that voice, and they are providing that voice, because there are many people who go down the route of reproductive science will, especially if they are prepared to go on the long journey that it often is, like for lots of people, having a baby from their first round of treatment isn't, it's not impossible, but it doesn't happen for everyone. You're often on that roller coaster for a while, and lots of people who are prepared, who have the emotional and financial often capacity to continue, do end up with families, but not everybody does, right? And it is important that those voices stay in the arena, and I feel very happy and I want to be in that arena, because part of me doesn't want to be ostracized to the childless community, because I think I share as much with people who've been through fertility journeys and had children, as well as other mothers, than say maybe more than people who are actively child-free, who never wanted children. I mean, but actually I share stuff with every woman, and I want to speak for every woman, really.
Let's talk about your writing, because I think from what you've mentioned with your writing and how you wrote, you were doing it alongside each of these journeys, were you? On all 3 books, were they written in the moment, or did you write any of them after the event?
It's a bit of both, actually, Sarah. Yeah, I think when I started writing The Pursuit of Motherhood, I started from a point where I'd been on that journey for a while, but I didn't know what the ending was. So I started writing towards what I thought was going to be a happy ending. Certainly with 21 Miles, I started writing it because you'll know from 21 Miles that one of the things in it is that there's this thing about swimming the channel that a lot of people don't know, which is if you want to be an official channel swimmer, you can't wear a wetsuit. And that's because Captain Matthew Webb, who was the first man to swim the channel in 1875, didn't wear a wetsuit. So you have to adhere to the same conditions. So the only way to keep warm is a bit of human padding. And I love food, so it was a license to eat. And so I also decided that I was going to write to 21 famous women, some mothers, some not, and ask them to meet and eat with me to help me get fat to swim the English Channel. and answer the question, does motherhood make you happy? And I certainly, and that was an extraordinary journey, meeting with these women. And I had those meetings leading up to swimming the channel, and I sort of knew at that point that I discovered this love and passion for writing, and that there was a story here that I wanted to write. So but one of the other things about 21 Miles is that my relationship was breaking down at the time with my partner Peter. And it's really funny, I didn't know. He's a very present figure in my first book, The Pursuit of Motherhood. He's a very shadowy figure in my second book, 21 Miles. And actually, I didn't even really know what was happening to our relationship as I was writing it, or when I got to the end of writing it. And one of the reactions I get from people, which I think is really interesting, is some people say, oh, I'm so glad you and Peter made it. You know, they read the ending as that we got back together and you know, resolved everything that was difficult. And other people question whether we did. They want to know whether we did. And then, of course, as you've read my third book starts really with that relationship broken. It's the end of that relationship, and the journey to the mountains is very much about healing that. And I because I was listening to all these episodes of Desert Island Discs, you know, again, I was doing that on the journey, and I knew that there was a book in there, but it wasn't until I came down from my final successful, in inverted commas, because it didn't feel successful, let me tell you, summit, because it was so traumatic out there, but then I finished writing the book. So it's a combination of both, really.
It's a fascinating way of working, isn't it? A way of writing for you, especially with the first one, because I think, yeah, if you'd started with the knowledge that you weren't going to have a baby at the end of this, it probably would have changed your writing, and who knows. But I know a lot of the women that I support on their fertility journeys love that book as an inspiring book, and they know the story, and they know that you didn't have a baby and that it wasn't successful with the IVF that you had, but they still find great inspiration because it's so very present and real in the moment. Because you were writing it as you went. So that's one story. The next two I love because you have woven some really special parts of your character and your interests within them. You know, the first one, like you said, is about the food and the meeting with people and eating, and alongside the swimming, you know, they're interwoven really beautifully. And of course, your third book that's more recently released is Desert Island Discs through and through, which was fascinating. And it's such a refreshing book because it isn't just about a climb and about the kind of the part that, I mean, I'm not at all. I'm very much an unlikely athlete and just not an athlete, you know, at all. So I would not relate to swimming or climbing in any way whatsoever. But because your personal story is woven throughout, it kept me so engaged and so interested each step of the way. And especially this last one, you talked about crafting your story, and it's really beautifully done, the way you've woven little snippets of what's happening on your pursuit. At the start, you didn't even know that you were going to climb a mountain. It was more like there has to be something else, like what's it going to be? And it's really interesting as you talk through the music and what's going on in your life, and then these little insights into where you were with the climbing. And we all know, because it says it on the book, that you climbed Everest, so we know what's coming, but it's a really gradual process to get there, and really interesting. And I shared with you on our emails as we were arranging this podcast that it was taking me a very, very long time to read your book. I only just finished it just before we spoke, because I had to keep stopping listening to the music because it's so evocative of Desert Island Discs. So tell us a bit about that as
Sarah,
well.
I mean, you've said so much there that I want to respond to, and also I feel so blessed for. I mean, because the first thing is, I mean, each of those three books are standalone, right? So, you know, of course, you can come to them at any point and just read that book, and you don't need to read the other books, but they are a trilogy, and so it means so much to me when people have read them sort of in order. I mean, it's funny now because, you know, because Save Me from the Waves, my third book, is a book for a wider market. It's or wider audience. people are coming to that first and then now reading backwards, which feels a bit odd to me, but still lovely, because it is a real development. I mean, and also the other thing is that not only are they standalone, but I also, and you don't need to read them all, I also recognize that each one will connect with different people, right? So it's really, you know, such a blessing when you say that, you know, people that you work with, clients that you work with who are on a fertility journey, really love the pursuit of motherhood. And I would say that that it's very visceral and raw, you know, like all good misery memoirs. I describe it as my sort of misery memoir, although I always try and bring, and it ends on a cliffhanger, you know, I always try and bring anyway. So but I always try and bring hope and humor into everything I write. But and then yeah, it's really interesting. But I know that really connects with people. 21 Miles is much more of what I would describe an every woman book, you know, like, because it's so much about this question of motherhood, like, and female identity, that I know that a lot of women really respond to that. And, you know, it's really interesting what you're saying, like, if it was just about swimming, you might not have been so interested about it, but like, it is these really fascinating conversations, and, you know, bringing in some of my passions like food. And, you know, like, save me from the waves. I mean, I do feel, of course, you know, like, the other thing that's happened is I've evolved as a writer. I've become, I believe I've become a better writer. You know, I had a publishing auction for this book. It's getting a lot of critical acclaim, actually. And so I do think it's my best piece of work. But it's really also interesting about this third book, because it's like, it's got to find its readership, because it is, you know, obviously people get excited by my story because I have become this first woman to swim the Channel and run a road marathon and climb Mount Everest, and so that's a really great adventure story, you know. So, but if people are wanting Ranulph Fiennes or Bear Grylls, right, if they're wanting that sort of book, which obviously a lot of adventure readers do, they're going to be disappointed in my book, because it's as much about music as it is about mountains, right? And so so that's interesting. And also, I think a lot of the pain in the book, and it's my most deeply felt book. It's my most analytical book about the struggle of life. And I see pain in every single word and every single authorial choice, right? But it's not always immediately visible to the reader in the same way that it is with The Pursuit of Motherhood, which is much more sort of visceral. And so I'm so delighted to hear that you read it slowly. It's the way it should be read. I want to, and obviously it's only in hardback at the moment. So what's really interesting at this sort of early phase is getting reaction to it and seeing how people are reading it and seeing who's resonating with it. And I think it is a book to be considered as an adventure. It's a book to be read slowly, and it's a book to read the music after each chapter. And I think in the paperback, I've got a meeting with my publishers later today. We will point people, I hope, much more directly to listen to this song, read this short chapter, because I'm a short chapter writer, and then listen to this piece of music. And I think that is the way to really, really experience it and get into the world of the book. It requires, I think, probably a bigger investment from a reader. But like, yeah, I hope people will go on it, and I'm very proud of it. And it means so much to me when people, you know, I do a lot of interviews, but when people have actually read all my books and really like engage with me in the way that you are, like, it's just a joy. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I couldn't not read them. They draw you in, the books. And something that you mentioned there about the pain, and it is the emotion of those three books, regardless of whether anyone could relate to infertility or at all. I'm not even a swimmer, so, you know, swimming to me is just not interesting, but I was really drawn into the emotion, the story, and then the swimming, you know, and I shared it with my mum, who's also not a swimmer, hence why I'm not a swimmer, and she was also drawn in and loved it, you know. So and again, the third one, it's the emotional journey that we go on with you that I think the readers can relate to, and why I think they're really special books, and I wanted to speak to you about it because they give us something as the reader. It's not just a story to be entertained by, you know, it's something that you can really deeply connect with, and it's really stayed with me. One thing that stayed with me is I'm now listening to Desert Island Discs, and I'd only ever listened to one episode. I think it was Emma Thompson one. For some reason, something
It's the
directed me to
great
listen
one,
to
which is
her
a great one. Yeah, she talks about her IVF journey in that.
Yes, that must be why I was directed at some point to listen to it, and it was great, but nothing made me want to tune into all of them until I read your book. And now I found it on Spotify, where every episode is there. I'm starting in the 70s, and isn't it fascinating? It's just, it is like, I mean, it's 1970s before podcasts existed, but
exactly,
it's that wonderful insight into a human being and their life, and why they choose their music, and really and just like bite-sized kind of interviews. I really love it, so thank you for the gift of Desert Island Discs, because I'm going to be now listening to that every day, just as you were.
Well, can I come back to you about that? But I mean, firstly, I feel like I should be on commission from the Radio 4, you know, because so many people are saying to me that they've come to Desert Island.
They're going to wonder why their listening figures have peaked right now.
Well, I hope they have. And then but it is extraordinary because it's the UK's longest running radio show. It's been going since 1942. So there are a lot of episodes to listen to, and like, as I describe it, an Everest of listening. But it really is the first sort of confessional interview that existed, you know, where people talked about their life through music, rather than just what they were, you know, their professional life or what they were promoting, you know, which is what interviews, you know, were up until that point. And the music absolutely, even now, you know, where confessional interviews are, you know, commonplace, the music, the format of people choosing their favorite music, 8 pieces of favorite music, it releases truths from them. It releases something from those interviews which is really, really extraordinary. And you know, I am fascinated by the human psyche. I'm fascinated by human stories, people's life stories, you know, and also the parallels that we all have in our stories. And you know, I have, like, you know, I think I've referred to this already, several things that are like core beliefs now, which I try and communicate, which is that we all have sad stuff. We all have things that are sad and shit in our life. And mine was that I couldn't have a baby with the man that I loved. And then I lost that man, and it heaped loss upon loss. And then I had even more hardship to face on the mountain, which I'd never experienced before and was heinous to me. But it's how you turn that sad stuff into something good for yourself and other people, which matters, right? And what I really learned from so many of what I call my castaway friends, because it was as if they were walking with me. I mean, in 21 miles, I met real life people, right? And in Save Me From the Waves, these amazing people, because the other thing is that it became the most brilliant social history lesson, that these amazing famous people are walking with me on this journey to the top of the world. In fact, people start saying to me things like, do you know what? That bit where you're walking with Paul McCartney in Scotland, I actually thought you were with Paul McCartney.
I really did. And I had to keep going back and rereading, because I was like, oh, that's interesting that she bumped into this person on the top of Ben Nevis or whatever. And then realised, and it seemed to be as the book went on, you got more intimate and more connected with them.
You're really right, Sarah, because there's a point, right, in the book. So at the beginning of the book, you know, and this is all authorial choices, right? So for the first half of the book, I'm listening them on my headphones, these very headphones I'm wearing now. And then there's a shift which comes, as you know, the book is divided into 8 sections of different types of music. And there's a bit where I go on to songs that make you happy, which is the second half of the book, where which is a sort of shift in sort of tone, where the castaways become my friends, and we start talking to each other. And that is a very clear sort of writer choice.
I love that. I really love that. And it reminded me, as I'm reading and preparing to speak to you, and for all the other guests that I'm speaking to on this new version of my podcast, which is a big thing to do, to relaunch and organize all of this. And it's taken a lot of my courage to do this. It was a real reminder of the benefit of us listening to other people's conversations and life stories, and how very valuable that is, and that this powered you to do something amazing. And and that was what was going on for you in the background, was being inspired by all of these many people that you were listening to. So
and just as one other point on that, which is that was my joy, right, in the journey. It was the music, it was the meeting these amazing people and feeling like they became my friends. It's not been for me, and with 21 miles, it was the meeting these incredible women and eating with them. The act of swimming and running and climbing mountains is not joyous for me. It's very, very hard, and I describe it as like a version of self-harm in the book, and but a positive version. But it, perhaps because it released the emotional pain, it gave me something that required my absolute focus to achieve, which I needed to take my mind off the emotional pain I was in. But there was nothing. And it has brought huge healing in things like this relationship that I've created with the sea and the mountains and with nature. But the act of doing these challenges has not been pleasurable for me. It's been very, very, very hard.
Mm-hmm. And we touched on joy earlier, and you just mentioned it a little there. But what is it that actually brings you joy? The one question that we ask everybody here.
Well, the simplest, straightforward answer to that is food and booze and box sets. good box sets on the sofa. There is nothing I like more than, after a big training session, to come home to a huge plate of food and something very cold, and starting with something very cold and a salty snack, and then a huge plate of food, and then a great bit of escapism. That is my joy.
I love that, Jessica, and you're really keeping it real, and we all can relate. All these wonderful achievements and amazing things you've done, but we need those comforts, isn't it? And what grounds us. I love that.
Can I just add one thing to that, which I think is really important? I've been reading Khalil Gibran's The Prophet recently, which a friend sent to me, which is a sort of like a seminal book, and he writes about joy and sorrow in that. And he says something that really speaks to me, which is, if you're someone who's had a lot of sorrow in your life, which I feel I have, and not only have I had a lot of sorrow, but I feel my sorrow very, very deeply, then you have to balance that with joy. You also, if you are someone who feels it and has had a lot of sorrow, you have a capacity to hold a lot of joy too. And I actually have realized that relatively recently, that the thing to do is, if you have sorrow, you need to balance that with the joy. And I have really lent into that. And so I love that question, and I know what my joys are. I've just given you one, food, booze and box sets. I have a range of others, and I lean into those joys as much as possible, particularly in the times of sadness, because they balance them out.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jessica. That's a really important message. Thank you. So we've talked about your 3 books. Save Me from the Waves is the one that's most recently out, and the one we would highly recommend you listening, reading, however you want to do it. How else can people keep in touch with you, Jessica? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, well, my website is jessicahepburn.com. I am on various social media platforms. Instagram, if you're an Instagram person. I'm also now on Substack, which is the new writer's social media platform of choice. If you sign up to my mailing list, you can become part of my Substack family.
Wonderful. We shall put all the links in the show notes for sure, so people can easily find you. One little thing I want to share with you, Jessica, that I learned after coming to your event and reading the book, which has kind of given me another type of connection with you and a bit of inspiration for me in my life, is that we were born in the same hospital in London.
The UCH.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And it was a hospital that saved my life, because they had technology there that, if that technology hadn't existed, heart rate monitoring, I wouldn't even be here. So my mum was always thankful that she was living in that part of London at that time, and I was born there. So,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Well,
and
you just have to say a little bit more about that. What was wrong when you were born?
My mum had lots of different health conditions, preeclampsia and all sorts going on in pregnancy. And while she was in labour with me, my heart stopped, and they had a heart rate monitor clipped to my head, so they knew. But it was one of the first hospitals in the 70s to have that technology, apparently. So
Oh,
they knew my
wow.
heart stopped. They did a crash C-section, and I was born. And we were both well, and we were both fine in the end. But yeah, my umbilical cord was apparently about an inch long, and
Oh,
I would
wow.
never have been born naturally, and they would not have known, without that technology. So it's an amazing
Wow.
hospital that we're thankful for. And
Wow.
yeah, it was wonderful to see we'd
So
started our lives
basically,
there.
yeah, so basically the technology communicated to them what was going on with you so they could then call
Yeah,
for a
they could take the
C-section.
action.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
it's, yeah, and we don't appreciate that so much, do we? It's standard technology nowadays, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
phenomenal. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for joining us and sharing so much. It's been fascinating. I feel like we've read another part of your story now and had another insight. Thank you so much, Jessica. It's
Oh,
been a
but
pleasure.
thank you for being such a great interviewer, Sarah. Seriously.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Fertile Mindset podcast. Please rate and review, and remember to follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Now, if this conversation has sparked something within you and you want to live your life with clarity, purpose, and joy, then I would love you to sign up for my Daily Seeds emails. They're delivered to you each day, giving you messages of support and planting seeds of inspiration. You'll also receive welcome gifts from me, including an EFT tuition video and some of my favourite tapping exercises to clear overwhelm, reduce stress, help you focus, and more, all completely free of charge. I'll also keep in touch with you about upcoming events and support that I think you'll like. Go to fertilemindset.com/dailyseeds to sign up. And I'll see you again next week for another episode of the Fertile Mindset podcast.